Right. Good evening, everyone, and let me welcome you to what is going to be the last session of this academic year of the joint seminars organized by the Fundação Louis Cunha and the Faculty of Arts and Humanities of the University of St. Joseph. But I'm already working on plans for next year after the summer, and I'm trying to get a few speakers lined up, and I'm thinking of even volunteering myself to talk about the two sailor princes who came to Macau over 150 years ago and who would have landed very close indeed to where we are tonight, just a little way along the street. And that in some ways resonates with the research interests of our speaker this evening, Manuel Perez Garcia, who is from the city of Murcia in Spain, which at one time was a Muslim settlement, as he has just been telling us, and is waiting for a full-scale archaeological dig. Well, perhaps they should do something like that along here, but I think that Macau, known as the City of Commerce and Culture, to cite one of the early books in Macau studies published by the University of East Asia, the first modern university in this territory. Usually, I'm afraid, commerce beats out culture, and any stay of execution is unduly short. And why is this relevant to us tonight? Well, when I first was approached by Professor Perez Garcia about a talk on his new book, Global Powers in the South China Sea, I thought, this must be something very, very contemporary, until I looked at the subtitle and saw that it actually deals with conflicts of power, the dynamics of competition in the 160 years before the Opium War, a time that was an event that was of crucial importance to Macau, and a time when this particular roadway, the Praia Grande, was very different indeed from what it is today. I haven't yet done detailed research into what used to be here before this very distinguished foundation back in the mid-19th century, but I'm quite sure it was not a tower block. It was probably a rather attractive looking either residential or commercial building, or possibly both. One of the many buildings along the famed Praia Grande view that one would see coming into Macau. So now, turning to our speaker tonight, Manuel Perez Garcia started with undergraduate studies at his local university. He has a PhD from European University Institute in Florence. It does sound as if you're extremely good at finding nice places to study. He's held postdoctoral fellowships at Tsinghua University in Beijing, and he's also had quite a number of visiting appointments at very distinguished universities around the world, the University of British Columbia, Leiden University, Cambridge University, that's my alma mater, St Antony's College at the University of Oxford, the UNAM in Mexico, the University of Tokyo in Japan. However, when he is actually at home, he is now Associate Professor at the Department of History in the School of Humanities of Shanghai Jiaotong University, as well as a distinguished researcher at Pablo de Olavide University. And before then, he was Associate Professor at the School of International Studies in Renmin University in China. He has had a very prestigious starter grant from the European Research Foundation, as well as other research funding, and he's published several books relating to relations, global history, and Asia, Europe, and the Americas as a world network, vicarious consumers, transnational meetings between the West and East in the Mediterranean world, that's from 1730 to 1808, plus his latest book on global powers in the South China Sea. So we're extremely lucky that he was able to find the time and indeed the funds to come to Macau, and let me hand the floor over to you, because I very much want to hear what you have to say to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Priscilla Roberts, for a nice presentation and going through the background and the experiences in the other universities. Take me back to my memories in 2011 when I came to China, to Shanghai, to Tsinghua University in Beijing. And actually that very year, 2011, 2012, was the first time I came here to Macau, was precisely to give a talk in the previous location of the Ricci Institute, which is, it was just right, the historical archive. And the historical archive of Macau ever since became the main place to carry on my research. And during, time really flies. From 2012 till now is nearly 14, 13 years.
14 years.
14 years.
Depending when you came.
Yeah, well, it's now within the perspective of time, it gives me not the impression, the reality that Macau is my second home in China. It's where all this work emanates. And coming to today's book, first of all, I would like to thank both institutions, the Ruth Konya Foundation and the University of St. Joseph, to host this lecture, which the main aim is to present, since we are here in the city center, to go out a little bit from the constraints of the University of Academia, so to present to the public in general the results of my research, which was precisely most of the historical sources from using this book comes from the next door historical archives of Macau, as well as other archives in China and Europe. But basically, this is the alma mater of this book is the historical archive of Macau. And I took, as Priscilla very well mentioned, this is the final result, this book, of the European Research Council project I was leading from 2016 until 2022. It was, now we are seeking always money for research funds, and at that time I was in the abundance of money. Now we're still keeping for application because, you know, this very prestigious grant was 1.5 million euros. So it allowed me to hire a big team, laboratory of European and Chinese researchers. So, and again, this is just a little piece of that work during more than 6 years. Okay, let's go a little bit back to business to present the book. I would like to maybe take note the whole hour, 30-40 minutes. Perhaps someone on the internet, on the live stream, we may have some pop-ups with some questions. But let's go to the presentation. As you can see from the cover of the book and the poster, this is the Treaty of Nanjing, which was signed in 1842. And actually, as Professor Robert very well said, if you read the first title, Global Powers in South China, actually that was my intention, to play a little bit with the present global affairs and with the historical, because at the end of the day I'm an economic historian. Actually, more and more I don't like to be categorized economic history, historian, because at the end of the day we are dealing in this field, international relations, sociology, economics, sinology. So if I have to label myself, I would like to say that I'm interdisciplinary by definition. So since we are studying here, or I'm trying to analyze the dynamics that happen in the whole region of South China Sea, overarching what used to be the main arena of the Iberian powers, Portugal, Spain, from Manila, when the so-called Manila-Acapulco galleon took place as the main trade artery connecting the Americas. So this gives us the whole tapestry of the region in which power, competition, trade wars, like today we have. So it gives us all this notion of market competition and the hunt for resources and the gaining markets. And that's why I use the concept governing dynamics. For those who are familiar with this concept, it's John Nash's concept. You know, John Nash, the very well famous mathematician who won the Nobel Prize and has this very wonderful movie, which is a Beautiful Mind. So I like to play with these concepts. Okay, so a little bit, very general. I prepared a very, I always like to have a huge number of slides in my presentation. Of course, I wouldn't have the time to go through all of them. So I will be playing around a little bit on that. But for you to have an idea, the outline would be just given very shortly. I don't like to take much of the time to keep talking about on theories. Could be a little bit annoying for the public, but the outline is theoretical framework of the research. And then the most important thing is what is the main contribution of the book or in this research in general, the hypothesis, questions, case study. And the case study is a comparative study of port cities, Macau and Marseille. So both two long-distance settings that globally make a big change in what we may call as an early globalization for circulation of goods, commodities, people. Marseille in South Mediterranean, in South Europe in the Mediterranean, Macau in South China, and both of them connected. So I will try to make sense of this case study in light with the question and hypothesis. Then I will give you some rough ideas about the sources, the historical sources and methodology and some conclusions. Okay, not taking much of your time, but one of the main themes of the book is to rethink on the concept of globalization. So what is the meaning? My colleague, who is working with me for a very long time, Professor Lucio de Souza, that some of you may know him. He's from Portugal, and he is also professor at the Tokyo Foreign Studies University. So we prepared this book, which was the early stages of the European Research Council project I directed. So it's where we try to rethink, reevaluate the concept of globalization in light with the notion of polycentrism and getting rid of the idea that globalization began like 1579. It's being quoted this year because it was the year that the Spanish Empire opened the main artery, what I mentioned before, the Manila in the Philippines and Acapulco, the port city of New Spain, today's Mexico, that connected the Pacific between the Americas, the Spanish American colonies with South China. So there's much literature about what is this concept. So we can discuss about the operational definition, how can we implement the concept of globalization in light of the geographical scope rather than ideological issues, and how can we make this concept operational. So here there is some literature, and the main argument on using the concept of globalization to study the dynamics or how these links among regions, trade nodes start to be operational, not in the early modern period, not even when Marco Polo made his voyages in China, or even Alexander the Great campaigns in the East. So basically globalization starts, as Pat Manning mentioned, since the land masses after the Pleistocene start to gain permanent contact. So per definition, globalization shouldn't be just quoted with one particular year. So here, again, a little bit, and since and this also, Priscilla is very, since your alma mater is Cambridge University, so Joseph Needham, of course. Everybody knows Needham puzzle. I'm not here to talk about Needham, but to mention him about the framework of the book, and also the concept and discussion about the Great Divergence debate, why China didn't grow at the same level that European regions in the first industrialization, and which was made by the California School and Ken Pomeranz. But actually, the root of that discussion is Needham question. So, question of modern science and economic leadership of capitalism, comparing China with Western regions. So I mention this because since the case study is about Macau and Marseille, the main question is why this particular case study? So how can we make operational and relevant a particular case study? So, well, since the main operational concept here is about maritime trade, circulation of global goods, so it makes sense to talk about port cities. So my choice was Macau in South China, connected with Canton, the Guangdong area, also Fujian, and how both overland and maritime routes were connected. The same with the case of Marseille in France. But the direction of global history now is to present more case studies. So we can also talk not only Macau and Marseille, so why not the old port of Amoy or Xiamen in Fujian, with maybe the port of Lima in Peru or some other area. So that is the basic concept, is to assess a comparative model. We think about the characteristics, how can we compare it, the framework of the data, and then how can we make this provisional model operational in light of empirical foundation. So here we are talking in a general way about great empires that create complex administrative system and bureaucracy. So Philip II, at the end of the 16th century, ruling the Spanish Empire, and Nurhaci here as the first Qin emperor when the Ming Dynasty was overthrown in 1644. Because, you know, this is for you to understand the chronological framework of the book. I was mentioning 1680 to 1840, so precisely the whole road since the Qin Dynasty right to power, that was the whole period of factionalism, competition, expansion of China, as well as European power setting in the region to gain resources, like it's been today. The whole area of South China is the spot, a hot spot for conflicts. So that takes us back to the Qin period. So for this complex administrative system created by the empires, the good thing for us as an historian is that we have a very large amount of information at our disposal. So then comparing the whole, the nature of the expansion of China during the Qin Dynasty, not overseas expansion because of the notion, the feature of the empire as a self-sufficient. So no need to expand like the European empires, or here, like John Eliot from Oxford University used to mention, like the Iberian empires, when the Union of Crowns took place during the 16th and 17th century, he called the composite monarchy. But then here, the European, Spain as an example, but the same with British Empire or the expansion of the Low Countries, the Netherlands. So it's a maritime enterprise. So a different concept that when we are comparing with China. So here we have already our main theoretical framework and asset to establish this comparison and these historical trajectories between long-distance areas. Basically, here one of the main things I would like to discuss is that trade networks. I will take a little bit also about the tributary system, the naval competition, and mercantile classes. So that will take us to maybe compare the Silk Road dynamics or a Columbian exchange with the routes of and the expansion of the European powers in the Americas after Columbus' arrival to the Americas. So also one of the most important things of this theoretical approach is to get rid of the Eurocentric, Western-centric bias or narratives, or this which sometimes we inherit in the historical narrative, this building, developing hegemon or hegemonic powers, and that may obscure a little bit our analysis. So we need to get rid of these notions, and this takes us to the very early days after the World War II, works by Arnold Toynbee, Karl Polanyi, all these classic works that have this sense of Eurocentrism or Western-centric bias. This also takes us to the concept of the great divergence I was mentioning before, and this still classic narrative about Eurocentric bias that we can see also in the book by Huntington of The Class of Civilization, the remaking of the world order. And this takes us to the origin. That's why I mentioned earlier Needham's puzzle, the Science and Civilization, to the California School and the origin of the Great Divergence, which is still very much present, the Great Divergence debate, in today's scholarship in global economic history. So Ken Pomeranz and the California School try to rewrite, set new question of the role of China or Asian economy in the world market. So here, getting rid of these biases, as I mentioned, with the California School, and the debate, actually this is the recent publication by Patrick O'Brien, that the debate is over after 20 years of so much debate, and still present much this debate and this bias on repeating over and over this theoretical framework without any empirical basis. That's why it's necessary, as I mentioned before, to use new case studies, like the case of Macau, Marseille, but you can name many others. The important thing is to keep digging, keep presenting new material and new case studies that can reformulate the whole concept and debate of the great divergence. Because, you know, towards the new global economic history that we need to revise and surpass this great divergence debate. So, for instance, coming to the main notion of Ken Pomeranz when he was mentioned about the lag theory, because before the discoveries of the Americas, the GDP per capita of the main world regions were more or less equal, but within the so-called European lag in the arrival and discovery of the Americas, this in the long term, mainly during and after the first industrial revolution, meant a dramatic takeover of Great Britain and the European economies and make a stagnation of the East Asian economies, basically China. And all this also keep putting and searching for the year or origin of globalization, like here, 1820. This is by the work of Jeff Williamson and Kevin O'Rourke from Oxford University, that they say the globalization started in 1820 when global prices converged. So, and of course, all of this, as you can see here, is made by the historical statistic of Angus Madison, which should be pretty much revised because they use for all these charts the per capita GDP using the fictional currency, Jiri Karmi's dollar. So I don't want to stop much on this, but how can you make from 2000 or 2025 or 26 until the present moment, make backward projection of GDP until year one without any historical digging in the historical archives and sources. So you are manufacturing your own data precisely to present or to guide and use the data to your own question. But that should be all revised, all these charts, all this data, and that is the main aim of the book. So instead of presenting and using this repetition of nonsense of GDP per capita, we need to pay more attention to the economic dynamics, regional interactions, and then study changes in patterns of consumption, trade networks, people that run business, intermediation, and that take us back to the geographical units to make a new macro history approach instead of talking with the nation-state geographical unit, which is a modern one, and that doesn't work pretty much on early modern economies. So again, we need to get rid of all this narrative and discourse. Of course, if I say this in front of my colleagues from economic history in LSE, Oxford, Cambridge, I will be like in the course and like the Inquisition, I will be born in the middle square. But, well, that should be our work. We're historians. We need to revise, we need to rethink, right, Priscilla? So we shouldn't take for granted.
A lot of early data is very questionable.
It's, for me, it's questionable very much. So I put this not to say, look, guys, take this data, this is the my thing. No, precisely, I put this to question it and not to believe on this. Of course, if I say this in front of, now I'm lucky. We have a very small audience here. I don't know how many people is in the live stream, but well, some pure economist or economic historian will burn me like an Inquisition. But well, again, we need to rethink.
I suspect that for most accounts of battles, armies, deaths, etc., you need to take off at least 1 0 at the end. That most of these figures are greatly exaggerated.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Yes, we build our own gods, but yeah, revise, and that is the nature of the academic debate. Present new things and discussion. It's not like keep repeating. So, but we are talking this on the European War Center, but we can turn to the other way around to the Sinocentric narratives as well. So if we try to redefine with maybe with more precision, or I don't know if I have success, if I succeed on doing this within the book, but one of the main things I try is to give another approach, perspective to the Opium War narrative. I mean, I will come to this a bit later, but actually I was trying to, one of the things, that's why I put governing dynamics and this struggle of powers, because powers, by definition, it is rebellions, civil wars, market competition. So one of the things about the Opium Wars, I try to present it more with the lenses of a domestic conflict in China, of course. Great Britain, France play a role on it, but don't forget that at that time, the Qing dynasty, of course, this is an obvious thing, but sometimes not quite obvious for when we approach this research, is a foreign dynasty, a Manchu dynasty, ruling the Han majority. And since the early arrival of the dynasty, everything was about factionalism, struggles in the court, who has the legitimacy to run the court. And in South China, Macau, Guangdong, Fujian was the place where the money was made, and those were in hands of the not on the Qing, but of the Han majority and also of the Hakka. And this was basically the main circuit for American silver. So that could be one of the ingredients to review and revise this. The nature, what will take us from 1680 to 1840, the long road in the very long term, or using the Brodelian concept of longue durée, so to arrive to that point. So it's, again, to rethink. So all this, again, all these narratives has a very much national issue. We are talking about the Western hegemony, so within the Ida-Ilu or One Belt, One Road that today we have in China since 2014. So we have this infrastructure investment skeleton that has these historical reminiscences. So that's why, again, for the title of the book, I'm trying to play with contemporary present world issues to historical ones, and then try to think and to revise the nature of the present conflicts, of the road of the geopolitical order at the present moment, how we have arrived to this point all over the past 200, 300 years. Conflict, trade war. So that is what we have today. And these are the, well, this is need to be perhaps a little bit updated, but this chart is from 2022, 23 of the global conflict. So everything's about trade. Global trade, the tariffs, the disputes. We have the trade wars between the China and US, the technology, which is the artificial intelligence, the fourth industrial revolution, we can say. The first industrial revolution is what I was mentioning before, after the discoveries of the America, using the American region as a main place and market for economic resources, raw materials, energy sources, which was the main arena of conflicts among European powers, and later within the arrival in the Philippines of the Spanish Empire and also the Portuguese in Macau. So the whole area of the East Asia, South China, was the main hotspot for this search for resources. So we can talk about neo-mercantilist policies, the relevance of to understand the roots of the current global affairs, financial productive systems. So this takes us back. I like to put here this picture. And I think, for a Portuguese colleague, the Treaty of Tordesillas was something really, really big, as well as the Spanish one. During this period, not even the British Empire was the main power, it was mainly Spain and Portugal. So after the discovery of the Americas, actually I call this the early modern Cold War. So the world was split in two main zones, the Western Hemisphere for the Spanish Empire and the Eastern Hemisphere for Portugal. So we have this main division of the Iberian empires that take us back precisely to delineate here the main hotspots, conflicts, area in which basically at the end we are talking about the South China Sea, Southeastern Asia, the Molucca, Malacca, the region of Malacca, which was actually the place that Columbus wanted to arrive. He didn't want to arrive to the Americas, but travel to the east, westwards to get to search for the species, which was the main economic resource thriving good at that time. So here can help us to understand also what we have in the world today. Trade wars, early modern trade wars, the European enterprise for conquering East Asia and Chinese markets. And here, just in a couple of seconds, this should be the whole package, as I mentioned before, theoretical one, to redefine what we can call the new global history, precisely using interdisciplinary approach, playing with the scale, jeu d'échelle, using again all this jargon of the Annals School of France, game of scale, from micro to macro, and also rethinking the concept of globalization. The implementation, actually this is what I did in my previous book, Global History with Chinese Characteristics. So how can we really implement global, the new direction of global history, the new direction of the Great Divergence debate, new sources, collaboration, digital methods, academic network. That should be the direction in my opinion. So, and this is, sorry, oops. Sorry. Click the wrong button. Yeah. So yes, so this was the main result of my previous book, the Global History with Chinese Characteristics. So here you have the link. It's open access. And this is what we are talking here about more case studies, precisely port cities, Macau, Marseille. These are jeu d'échelle of game of scale, going from a purely comparative approach to that one on a micro level that look at global conjunctures. The main hypothesis that I formulate here is the role of merchants as the main agents to introducing new goods, leading to changes on consumer behavior, basically changing patterns of consumption and opening new markets. So that's the main thing, and that's why I use here the concept of vicarious consumption as merchant as a main agent to change the market, the networks of distribution, and also the transforming the demand for these goods. And this is what I did in my first monograph, Vicarious Consumer, which is we can discuss this in other occasions. It's a concept of pure economic concept by the economist Thorstein Veblen, but I make here a different approach with the study of the global circulation of goods. So what is new on this comparison using Macau and Marseille? So the main thing is connection and differences of two particular localities in South China and South Europe through diverse process to analyze the circulation of goods, consumption, the forming of trade networks, and the competition all over that formation of trade or merchants elites, and how market goods were accepted or rejected and the main thing is to solve a problem not previously solved. So the interaction of these consumer these trade networks and how it correlated with economic growth, because that is the cornerstone to analyze, to reformulate prosperity, not about GDP, not manufacturing fictional data like Madison and the Dutch, or basically it's all from the University of Groningen school they do. But how consumer behavior, how real people, and how can we find this data in the local archive? That is the new revision, or the revision we should do to the economic growth. On this, well, I spaced it. So again, mining new historical data, method, and case study. So which not only connect Macau Canton with Marseille in south with South Spain. So how this is correlated with what we call, or what I call, the global traces of Chinese silks. So here I just take, in the project or in the book, there are many commodities or global goods analyzed, but today I put here as an example because it's very characteristics, the silk and the social actors, the trade networks that were operating in China, America, and Europe, connecting all port cities: Macau, Canton, Lima in Peru, Acapulco in Mexico, or New Spain at that time, Marseille in France, Cadiz, Seville. So we have all this from Europe, from the Iberian Peninsula, going through South Africa, India, Southeastern Asia, the South China region. So this is precisely this formation of trade zones is the main operational approach to get rid of the Sinocentric or Eurocentric bias, to search for hegemons or main world regions. So here we need to reformulate the narrative within a polycentric or multinodal areas in which each region all over the world plays an essential role in the world economy and the circulation of goods without any particular center. So we have all this global region, and here market integration, global consumption. Again, we need to see my words with the map. Macau in South China connected with the Canton, the inner trade routes, and also here with Manila in the Philippines, the whole Southeastern Asia area, all over with India. So here we have a multinodal, the main trade routes connecting, and Macau be the main hotspot, because remember that the more than 2/3 of American silver production did not end in European market, but all of them was in hands of Chinese trade elites from Macau and Canton, and that should be one important factor that needs to be reviewed in light of the long-term analysis of the Opium War. In the case of Marseille, the same, connecting the whole Mediterranean with the ports South Spain, connecting the Mediterranean with the Atlantic, and the entry of goods here from the eastern market, from the East Mediterranean. So here we can visualize better in the lower map, so how Macau and Marseille could be or is a relevant case study. And as I mentioned, more than 2/3 of American silver ended up in Macau and Canton during the Qing Dynasty early modern period. So that, because of these thriving circuits of market that connected also with the area of India, as well as the other areas in the Pacific, Indonesia, Malacca. So this is very relevant to analyze again what happened with this capital accumulation, and to ask ourselves what role did it play for the long-term arrival to the Opium War and market competition. Macau, beautiful map here. I love this map. Was made by Kanshi, commissioned in 83, 84, just right after Taiwan was seized. And here, the cannons in the fortress of Macau that we have actually before yesterday. I have a little nice walk during the evening, which is really nice. You have a really nice overview of the fortress, and this here the Manchu banners play in which Macau was again the main hotspot for the entry, the gate for overseas trade during the Qing period. And Marseille, the same thing during the 18th century. And here we can talk in a moment. The Rouge Frères Company, which could be the Rockefellers of the 18th century in Europe, in Marseille, making this financial operation in the different areas of the Mediterranean, connecting precisely all these are the circuits of the silk market that enter Europe region through the inner trade, overland route, but basically the maritime trade. And as I mentioned, Marseille, Macau, one case study. So, but we can make any. Why not Naples in South Italy or Livorno in North in the Tuscany, comparing with Xiamen perhaps, or Ningbo, or Tianjin. So there are many case studies that we can make. The most important thing is to formulate a proper one and then digging into new empirical material. So that is the main question. So Marseille, Le Vieux-Port, here really nice one of the 18th century, and again the main hotspot for global trade. And here you can see for the lovers of Alexander Dumas, the Chateau d'If, which was the inspiration for the Count of Monte Cristo. So you can see here also in literature the nature of Marseille. The Rouge Frères family, again, the Rockefellers at that time that operate in China market for the silk commodities. Here I build the whole genealogy of their network. And here really nice, important, during the whole European Research Council project, I spent huge amount of time, just 5 minutes walking from here at the historical archive, digging into the Grill letters. I guess some of you should be familiar with this. Here is the whole, of course, if Paul Van Dyck were here, he knows about this. There is a huge, very nice catalog of the Grill, which actually was the main director, the Johann Abraham Grill of the Swedish East India Company. And here in the Historical Archive of Macau, huge collection, not very much used in the historical research. So when I found this treasure, okay, I have here really nice material to present. So we have the Rockefellers, of that time, the Rouge Frères, and maybe we can have here the Rothschilds of Macau Canton in the 18th century, which was basically the Grill company, the Johann Abraham Grill. Here the Grill letters, beautiful ones. You can see here in all of this correspondence, and this is a really neat example of microhistorical analysis in which we can build up the whole narrative for what I was mentioning before, the global traces of silk market. How can this particular commodity market and trade networks, what could be their role in the whole great divergence debate on this big question on why China did not grow at the same level that European economies. Maybe the question is Eurocentric per se, but here, because global history start in the local archives. So here, the home traders of Canton, you can see here the names. Manila, one of the main places, so we have Canton, Manila in the Philippines. Here we have Mexico and Marseille. So because the Grill was one of the main partners with the traders I mentioned before, the Rouge family, which managed a very big network of low and middle companies. So within this, we can make this social network analysis, and this type of, which I did with the database of the project, it helped us to make all these trade notes among different financiers, like the Maillot Brancherie, which is from Montpellier, Le Rouge friend from Fred family from Marseille, the Manila Anglais, the Chinese traders in Manila, the Grill in Macau and Canton, and the home merchants, which are very well studied by Paul Van Dyke. So here we have a pretty neat example of market competition and governing dynamics that we can see. And this, the Grill family, I made with a software, a genealogical software, the whole origin of the family, which was precisely not from Sweden, but it was from the Central Europe, from Osborne, but they have all this, and actually from Jewish origins. And they make the wealth of the family through business and trade, and they settle here in the yellow notes all their operations in Macau and Canton. And it's been said that at that time, 18th century, early 19th century, the Grill were funding the political factions, rebellions that aimed to overthrow the Swedish monarchy. So they were like funding of these political movements to change the status quo on the political system in Europe. So that is something really interesting I came across digging through the sources. So we can, I think, how much time do I have? Maybe 5 minutes. I don't want to take much the time. So we can mention this and call as an Asia-Mediterranean brokerage system, which pretty much blends both the Macau, Marseille economic and financial system, connecting here the companies functioning in South China, in the Americas, the Philippines, and the Eastern, Western, and North Europe. Circulation of goods, capital, and the exchanges of Asia or Sino-Western imports and exports. So here we have a free market, and well, I'm gonna pass this. So the demand for Chinese goods, the American ones. I wanted to discuss, but I don't want to, because one of the main things that we can also review within this market competition is the tributary system versus the Westphalian model. I don't have time to stop here, but of course we know this through the McCartney mission by the end of the 18th century. And this gives us a really important hint precisely about this market competition, and also the power struggle, which also is part of the name, global powers, part of the name of the book, between King George III and the Manchu rulers, the Qing court, for the opening, because that was the main goal of King George III and the British, to open not only Canton but other ports in China for overseas trade, and also to establish a permanent embassy or financial or commercial trade in commercial office in Beijing. But of course, the refusal of the Qing court was paramount in the result, and then the failure of the McCartney mission. There is much literature on this, and the resources we can review to analyze and review the McCartney mission. But these are also a really neat example about this market competition and what was happening at that time, 50, 40 years before the First Opium War. Okay, past this. And as you can see here, the whole system, and this is the main cover of the book, is the Treaty of Nanjing that put an end to the First Opium War, when the Canton system collapsed. And actually that was the main purpose of the McCartney mission, to not having Canton as the only port for overseas trade in China. And this give us, again, some hints about what I'm presenting here, governing dynamics, using the concept of Jonas and the balance of power in South China Sea. So one goal, China market. Then we have multiple players. So here we can make a nice exercise of game theory. Frontier of empires, which is the Iberian and the Chinese. In the Philippines, the border was the Philippines, so, and also Macau, where the Spanish and Portuguese empire had present. Then other players, other latecomers, Great Britain and France, the Manchu and the non-Han dynasty, foreign dynasty ruling China, against the majority, the Han and Hakka ethnic groups dominant in South China. And then, of course, European communities in China, Jesuits, missionaries, trade companies. And then what about North? Japan, Korea. So here we have a boiling pot for conflict. Multiple players, one goal, access to China market. Here, this is the geostrategic location for the South China Sea during the Qing dynasty, and also we can see until the present day. So we need to review and reformulate new questions, again, through new case studies, and to understand the importance of this in the whole trade wars today, but 200-300 years ago. And here, that's why I call the book Governing Dynamics, the NAS equilibrium, rules of the game, status quo, the world order, legal system, treaties, Westphalian versus tributary system, the dominant strategy, conflicts, negotiation, how conflicts were negotiating to be put into an end, the self-interest, what are the payoffs, losses, desirable incomes, and the rationale of players. So here, that's why I also use the concept, or I try to formulate the power paradox theory. Power accumulation, one thing, versus good governance and public good. The good ruler, actually, goes through the roots of the European Renaissance and the European modern system with the Leviathan, this big monster of power, on the good prince, the good ruler, or Mencius, the virtuous ruler. So here we can make this exercise about the actor's rationale about this power struggle. So yes, I think 5 minutes and I finish. So power really matters. So then we can really see who are the beneficiaries and the inefficient equilibria that perceive where private benefits to powerful are sufficient to enable them and suppress pressure for alternative property rights, land, trade tariffs, access to new resources. So here is the main thing and the key function of the state, centralization, or also we can talk about the supremacy dilemma, concentrate power under autocratic rules, or adopt a less interventionist measure to foster market-driven economy based on innovation. Actually, that is also what is happening pretty much today. We are, reversing into evilly states ruling by autocrats. Well, we can see any region in the world today who is not in conflict and is, let's say, the role of the individual important today. So at the end is certainly not. We are immersed into this never-ending struggle about power and economy. So it's in the sense of the humankind. And here one of the features to analyze this, again, monopolies is what we can do here, reviewing the Canton system, the Iko Tongshan, the Qianlong Emperor in Qing Dynasty when Canton was confined as the only port, and the role of the home merchant and the factories. Of course, on this, Paul van Dyck has a very long research and has done pretty much well the work on this. But it's important here to, within my narrative, to rethink about the role of this Canton system. Okay, I'm going through this here. So at the end, we have a whole transformation of China economy, and also the Canton system could help us to rethink also in the contemporary period. So the establishment of the special economic zone, the Jinji actually that was put by Deng Xiaoping within the opening of China in the 80s. So maybe, someone read the role of the Canton system and also this open special trade zone like Macau. So maybe that was part of this thinking when the opening of the 80s took place. And again, I finish here the presentation. So within also what I mentioned before, the silver question, how can we formulate the great divergence debate, the monetization of China economy, and again, Canton and Macau as a main place for silver, American silver accumulation, Spanish silver coins, which was again the main resource, the main currency for these financial economic exchanges. So yeah, I think I should finish here and keep the other slides for any potential discussion. So thank you for your patience.
Well, that was a really rich talk, and certainly I have a lot of questions or a lot of ideas. I'm also wishing that I'd got in touch with Jeffrey Gunn, who's here at the moment for a few weeks, I think, and perhaps Josh Ehrlich as well from UMac, though he may be away on doing research at the moment, so that I think you would all have benefited from each other's suggestions. I don't know if this is a deliberate omission. At the moment, I'm chairing a book prize committee, and for some reason, this year we've got an awful lot of books related to the slave trade, slavery, and its consequences. And so for the past few weeks, I've been reading quite a lot about this, and it struck me that one issue that is not brought up is actually the slave trade. Is that deliberate?
Well, yeah, because
I know it's a very, very big subject.
Well, actually, if not only my colleague, but my very good friend here, which I mentioned, Professor Lucio de Sousa, who is, my main collaborator long years ago, still in the project and what we do, he is the expert on slavery in the whole region for early modern period in Japan, the Philippines, Macau. So yeah, on this, I'm not the one to be asked about the slavery trade and precisely in this region. But yes, of course, it's important, very important, and I believe it's a very important factor which should be brought out within much more present for redefining the great divergence debate about the human labor.
Well, that's certainly been one of the themes of at least one of the books that I've been reading, that slavery and then the exploitation of colonial labor were means of extracting a surplus which was used to finance Western industrialization. It's also, in part, the book, which is about 20 or 30 chapters, also a plea for reparations, which I suspect is not going to get very far. Given the current political climate, the idea that most governments are
Very
going
sensitive.
to voluntarily hand over. when people are complaining, rightly or wrongly, that taxation is too high as it is. I don't really think that's going to get a great deal of purchase. There will be some token gestures, but probably not much more than that. Yes, I mean, it's all very well to say, but we deserve to get reparations. Who's going to get them? Which governments? And so on and so forth is an incredibly divisive issue.
Actually, I believe also that this it should be pretty much, yeah, it makes sense to put it in light of the reviewing of the greater version, but also revising the book, which I was reading again recently of the Why Nations Fail by Robinson, Acemoglu, and Robinson. They're talking about the exploitation. Making this, on one hand, now I mention this because, you just mentioned the question of the slavery, and then it pops into my head within the global scale, and I'm thinking on Acemoglu and Robinson, putting this rosy story about, well, the British were not so predatory in North America, so we have a history of success of European enterprise, which is the British Empire in the north, and then in south, still in North America, but you can see Mexico is not very in the same well developed like up north in the today's U.S. because of it was in hands of the evil Spanish Empire, the institution that created, and the exploitation of using the slaves. But I think we should reformulate because they don't use much. Again, they are also manufacturing because they are economists. All this GDP and data, but because I'm thinking of my colleague Lucio de Sousa, and his colleagues doing slave studies, using proper historical sources in the archives to review or redefine this big concept in which, again, slavery is very, no, you're totally right, but of course it escaped to my own capacity in the book.
Well, you covered so much ground as it was.
Yes.
Oh, you mentioned Needham. A good friend of mine, now dead for many years, but who was a substitute mother to me when I came to Hong Kong, she had a 30-year-long affair with him. He asked her to be his third wife.
Oh. Interesting.
Of course.
Yeah, please.
It's not supposed to be a dialogue.
Of course.
A duologue.
Congratulations! It was very interesting, and the first thing is that I noticed you've taken an approach to tell this history rather different than we are used to. So it's rather interesting to see that some issues that I fully understood, other issues that I did not understood my fault because lack of this expertise and this knowledge. But it's very interesting to how to look and how we can always try to learn something more from things that we may look in under a different perspective and a different point of view. I have three simple questions. I'm sorry for those being so simple, but I didn't understand it quite exactly in line what you explained afterwards. You mentioned a specific date, 1571. I didn't quite understand why, because talking about globalization, usually we understand that it started earlier and not on a specific date as such. We can find of a decade, 50 years or so. So why that specific date?
I don't like dates. I put that as an example because in the literature by other California school scholars, Dennis Flynn, Arturo Giraldes, and also there is much literature in Latin America and Spain saying that because 1571 it's been the year that the Spanish Empire opened the so-called Manila Acapulco galleon, or the China, it was called also the China galleons,
Okay.
connected Manila in the Philippines and Acapulco as the main monopole or the main area of the Spanish Empire for the trade, to open the trade or try to open routes with China, with South China. It was called Manila Acapulco galleon. It was one galleon or two per year that obtained the license from the Spanish king and the authorities in New Spain to go to Manila and then load the ship cargo with Chinese goods and then turning back to Acapulco. So it was only specific ships that obtained the license, but in real terms, there was a huge, of course, smuggling activities, contraband. But it is said in the academia, the main scholar world, that it was okay. This could be the year, because historians like to put names or rename things. Now we are talking, of course, in the past 40 years about globalization. Okay, so this could be the year of the early globalization. But I say myself, the other ones, 1820, from the economists from LSE, Oxford, they say no, it's 1820 when the global prices converge, the global market. So then is when we can talk about early globalization. But why not with Marco Polo? Why not with Alexander the Great?
Marco Polo, we may say that's single. It's a kind of individual opportunity to travel. Not pretty much trade was generated upon travel. But I would say, for instance, the early 16th century, where the trade was established between Brazil, India, and China. So it's a very strong routing that allow for instance, Europe and South America to communicate with Asia, in particular India and China.
Yeah, we can talk about particular events, facts, but I stay more with the concept of Pat Manning from Pittsburgh University, said that globalization started after the Pleistocene with the interaction of humans, traveling, and actually that is also one of the concepts. I use the concept of Bere Gordon-Child. He wrote in the 1920s the class of the dawn of the Western civilization, in which the drama of anger is what make people traveling, move back and forth. So why searching for I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but
now I understand the approach. The second thing also is perhaps also a small detail. You've mentioned that rule of thirds, one third.
Yeah.
I could not.
That is Dennis Flynn's geographical approach to the concept. Is when each of the 1/3 of the mass lands continents gets interaction precisely after the Pleistocene, and when after the discoveries of the Americas, when this interaction were more dynamic. So it's geographical. He called it himself the 1/3 theory. Okay. So I just mentioned there in light of the state of the art for this. But again, on this, and also about, because if we are, that's why I'm not very much a friend of this hyper-fragmentation of history, like economic history, social history, because then we are missing several pieces. So that's why, I don't know, maybe fortunate or unfortunate, I like to approach to the historical research, not like, the classical, traditional, old-fashioned researcher that stay only with a couple of documents in the library. It's precisely more than what you guys are doing here, is bring knowledge to the public. and play with things. It's like, for me, like historical research is like a oil canvas. So let's paint it with several colors, different methods, and see. Of course, the Mediterranean and the Penicillin is already discovered. We are not, but well, it's to approach to a problem with a different angle, and perhaps we see like a painting of Monet. Impressionism, from the very close distance, you see nothing, but if you go from the long distance, then you define the shapes.
Starting getting
Yeah.
a picture.
I always like to use this metaphor.
Just my third query is I found it also very interesting this kind of, for me, a new approach that you highlight about Marseille. My impression was that Marseille was typically a 19th century port city based on the existence of the channel, the Sinai Channel, that will allow a faster and quicker communication between Europe and Asia, India and China. But so you, through your research, you've identified a clearly 18th century,
17th, 18th
17th,
century.
18th century focus and power, Marseille as a power harbor.
Yeah, I mean, because the Mediterranean,
Detrimental.
basically during the 17th century, the main traders in the western region of the Mediterranean were basically the merchants from Italy, the Genoese. But in the late 17th, early 18th, because for one reason, we have the succession war in Spain, the French took over, and the traditional Italian merchant houses in Spain were removed by the French.
Okay.
So that is very, we have, let's say, more or less stable period during that time, because of the Ottoman Empire was more or less, more calming down. But it was the time when this flourishing market, having the French houses like the Rouge family of Marseille, took over in the whole Mediterranean, in the world trade.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you.
Well, yes,
we're pretty
I
much
suppose
covered.
at this point I must thank you for a very, very stimulating talk. I'm sorry we didn't have a bigger audience, but
It's okay, we are in
meant that
family.
it meant that we were able perhaps to talk more intensely and more informally. If anyone is out there in the ether, I hope that you enjoyed it too. But thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. Okay.